Hey guys, welcome back to the Crypto Rundown. As Bitcoin continues to make all-time highs, we have an awesome episode for you today. The timestamps are down below for what you want to watch, but we know with all-time highs, we need Bitcoin charting and the altcoins. Are they coming back? Is altcoin mania coming? Brendan will let you know, right, Brendan?
Yeah, exactly, Tiva. This has to be one of the most asked questions that we get over here is when is the altcoin market going to go absolutely parabolic? And that's one of the big talking points of today's episode. We actually compare how Bitcoin and the altcoin markets have rallied in previous market cycles to our current circumstances. But we also take a look at everything that's happening in the news. I mean, not only is Bitcoin skyrocketing to new all-time highs, altcoins breaking out, we're seeing record levels of inflows and other metrics. But BlackRock actually surpassed MicroStrategy in terms of total Bitcoin owned. It's a war zone over there. MicroStrategy is taking out loans, trying to take back the mantle over BlackRock. And also, Grayscale is trying to keep as many customers as possible.
It's an absolute bull market filled episode. And again, check the show notes below for what you want to watch. You can jump around, click around to the timestamps. Please give us a like, subscribe, comment. Thanks for watching and enjoy the episode.
All right, everybody, and welcome back to your Crypto Weekly Market Rundown, where we talk about everything that's happening in the great world of crypto, from the technicals on the chart to the fundamentals in the news. We spend the time doing hours of research so that you all don't have to. And man, another week of positive growth in crypto. It feels like every week we come back and we say, everything's doing great. We're hitting new highs. We're breaking new records. And this week is no exception to that rule. We have a lot to talk about. I mean, Bitcoin hit new all-time highs. Ethereum is soaring. Tons of records are breaking. We're seeing just multi-year highs in terms of a number of statistics. Inflows are through the roof. Everyone wants in on crypto. But before we get into the weeds of everything that's happening, remember that you can watch the video side of things on YouTube if you are a Spotify or Apple Music listener. And this wouldn't be a crypto market rundown without my companion, Captain Tivo. Tivo, how are we feeling on your side?
Captain Tivo's feeling good. The ship is steering in the right direction. Excitement is at an all-time high. I know you and I were just talking before the show. We've never been more busy, but we've also never been happy to be more busy. It's all positive. Yeah. And before I toss it to you and we get started, did have an ask out there for the listeners. So if you're listening on Spotify, Apple, wherever you listen, or on YouTube, YouTube subscribe, obviously, but for the podcast people, if you could just leave us a review, 5 stars, and on Apple, I know you can type something. Like if we've helped you in the last year, it would be a huge help to us to keep this going. We give it to you guys for free twice a week. We've brought on countless crypto alpha projects over the last year that, if you go back and look at Fetch AI was on the program, Say and Sui, like these are like 300, 400x projects, free crypto alpha. The rundown, we're going to go over some stuff that we talked about weeks ago that gave you guys a ton of alpha, like the Robinhood call or telling you that there wasn't enough Bitcoin supply. So if you could, 5 stars, write us a review, tell us how we're helping you or tell us how you're enjoying the program. It would mean a lot to us and it helps us keep putting these out for free twice a week. So thanks for your time if you go ahead and do that for us.
Absolutely. Well, with that being said, Tivo, the market's taken off. We have said this before in our rundown notes, but when we're going through this, we actually had to adjust our notes 3 different times, saying Bitcoin hit a new high of 72,800. The next day we came into our notes, we had to rewrite it and say Bitcoin hit a new all-time high of 73,000. We had to come back in this morning and say, well, guess what? Today, at the time of recording this on March 13th, Bitcoin hit another new all-time high of $73,700. So price is just continuing to move up and up and up. And we got a little bit of a pullback yesterday on March 12th. We came back down to our previous resistance level. We're going to go over that once we get into the charts. But Bitcoin feels unstoppable here. And I want to kind of emphasize, a couple of points, but one of those being that it's not uncommon for the people who are internal. They probably heard me talk about this, but it's not uncommon to see Bitcoin pull back anywhere from 10, 20, 30, 40% in a bull market. You look at the 2017 cycle, you look at the 2021 cycle, Bitcoin will have, 6, 8, 10, 12 pullbacks that are double digit, decent size pullbacks. Now, we saw one about a week and a half ago when Bitcoin had that $10,000 drop. But even then, I think that was like a 15, 16, 17% drop in Bitcoin. It's not uncommon to see Bitcoin pull back, double that. And we've seen it in previous runs when Bitcoin is soaring. And I think the kind of key takeaway there is that it's not a time to panic. In fact, those are the times when I'm the most interested on accumulating the dip. When Bitcoin pulls back to its 20 or 50-day moving average, or when it pulls back to these previous consolidation zones, these previous resistance levels, that is when I am the most excited about accumulating on Bitcoin. And we haven't had a ton of pullback yet. So I'm looking at this area. I'm not bearish on Bitcoin, right? I'm not shorting it, but I am acknowledging that, at some point in the future, it's likely that we see a pullback. Now, is that today? Is that next week? Is that next month? I don't have a crystal ball. We can look at the charts and get a general idea of when things are slowing down. But it is something that I'm preparing myself for. Actually, the other day, I was messing around in some of my centralized exchange accounts, loading them up with USD and USDC so that I can be prepared for when those dips happen. I was placing some limit orders, fishing down at a lot lower prices, and kind of just preparing for that moment when it happens.
So,
Now,
just to build on that point, I wanted to say that our head captain, Kevin, has shared with us Kevy Mantras. He created a new segment on Twitter.
oh,
So,
I love
so
this.
Kevy Mantras is asking everybody to please repeat after me. I won't read the whole thing, but it's quite poetic. It's quite beautiful. So this is Kevy Mantras getting ready for what exactly Brendan just said. When the crypto market has a correction, I will not panic. I understand that it is normal after a huge run like this. The correction might be sharp and exceed 20%. It may come tomorrow. It may come in a couple months. If I have the money I feel comfortable investing, I will view it as an opportunity to buy more. But the one thing I will not do is panic because I think the market is crashing. I will not tie my emotions to the price, but rather my fundamental belief in crypto. And he continues on for a couple more threads there on X. But I mean, he tweeted this. I mean, let's local time is around midnight, so obviously Kevy Mantras couldn't sleep and wanted to give the good people some advice. But I woke up to that and I felt relief and I felt belief. And I mean, Kevy Mantras. I hope there's some more Kevy Mantras as we continue in the bull market.
I hope so, true, because he's exactly right. He is exactly right. He's spot on, and he's not alone. There's actually an analyst recently that was saying, hey, we're soaring to all time highs. And he noted two things. Number one, he said that we are seeing record levels of inflows. And I'm actually going to share a chart here because I think it's worth everyone kind of seeing this statistic. But what we have is we almost saw a 1 billion with a B. We almost saw a $1 billion inflow day the other day on Bitcoin. So if we go right in over here, we can see that by far, and I know it's going to be a little bit small, so I'm going to try to zoom in just a little bit, but we can see that this day right over here, it was the 6th of March. So about a week ago, we saw a total of $921 million in inflows, with BlackRock leading the charge at 788 of the $921 million in inflows. What does this mean? Well, BlackRock, and not just BlackRock, all the ETFs are having historic levels of inflows and interest. We've seen, and we've mentioned this on previous crypto rundowns, that other names want to get in. You have all these other people who passed it off previously and said, hey, we're going to wait for the dust to settle. We're going to see how this works. Well, all those people who didn't have the Bitcoin ETFs before, you have Merrill Lynch, you have a couple others, they're all now applying for their Bitcoin ETFs, and they're actually expediting the process in a lot of those cases. The kind of cool takeaway that I saw here is that it probably won't be that long until we see a $1 billion inflow day. I mean, we came within, $79 million here, right? So we reached 921 million. We're not that far away from saying, hey, Bitcoin is going to have a $1 billion inflow day at some point in the future. And that's not too far off. It's not this crazy concept. And that's just on the ETF side. Again, this is not counting all the spot activity that's happening, all the spot buying. This is saying, hey, just in the ETFs, it could have $1 billion in inflows. And there's one group out there who stopped selling for a little bit. In fact, you can see this little dip in the chart where they were selling a lot and then they stopped selling and now they're selling off again. I'll give you one guess as to who the bulk of this is coming from. and you'll probably get it right because it's Grayscale. Grayscale is back at it again. I saw them moving funds around the different exchanges in terms of like hundreds of millions of dollars. And they are back at it again. So they're not the only one. If you hover over this, you can actually see that there are 5 different ETFs that are outflowing here. But again, the bulk of that is coming from Grayscale. And the crazy thing is, I think they still have like 11 billion or something like that in assets under management. And they keep offloading here. Now, we're going to talk about them a little bit more as time goes on, because they actually do have some thoughts of their own to kind of combat this. And I think they are starting to recognize of like, hey, we can't keep this up. We actually need to retain customers. And a big reason why customers are leaving is because their fees are like 5 to 10 times higher than all of their competitors. And James Safart put it really clearly. He said they can't just cut their fees. And that's what everyone was saying. Everyone's saying, why doesn't Grayscale just cut their fees to be competitive with BlackRock and Fidelity and all these other people? And the reason for that being is that if they were to just cut their revenue, right? If they were to just cut their income by 90%, that would be detrimental to a business. Almost no business can say, hey guys, we're going to cut revenue by 90% and operate it as normal. It just doesn't work like that. You got employees, you got bills, you got expenses, and Grayscale's in that same boat. So they've been running their whole platform and their structure at this like 1.5 to 2% fee for years now, and it's not easy to just cold turkey cut that off to a 0.2%. So, that's kind of where they're at. But again, we're going to get into that a little bit later, because they are finding some new ways to kind of combat that. And I think a good kind of segue here is that as we're looking at the inflows and outflows and everything that's happening, I think we can go ahead and take a look at the charts too, because, we talked about prices and the impact and stuff that all this was having. So let's actually take a look at what's happening over here
Show me
by
some
looking
green
at what's
candles,
happening.
Brendan. Show me some green candles.
Oh, dude, TiVo, we got green candle after green candle. In fact, we've seen one red candle since March 6th. We've seen 2 red candles since March has started. If we zoom out to the weekly, it's even wilder. I mean, look at this. Look at this chart. I mean, it's just green after green. We're just rallying. And man, this thing really kicked it into high gear around January. So most people in crypto are sitting happy. And TiVo, is this enough green candles for you?
It's glorious.
It's glorious. It's like Christmas. It's lit up. Well, the kind of cool things that we're seeing happen right now is that I have this big line in the middle of my chart here. And you're probably saying, hey, Brendan, what is this white line in the middle of your chart? And if I zoom out, we can actually see that this is where the previous all-time high is, right? We have this line. We can see that right around 69,000. This is where we topped out previously. This is where we are at now. We have skyrocketed through this level. And if we go back to the daily chart, what we can actually see is that on this pullback that we saw yesterday, guess where we came down to retrace to? We broke through this all-time high, and then we retraced back down to this previous resistance level. Again, you can see that price came up to this all-time high, got rejected, came up again, got rejected, came up again, got rejected. And then after all of this, it finally broke through, and now this level of previous resistance around 68 to 69,000 is now acting as a newfound level of support. And we saw this with the large bounce that Bitcoin got yesterday, going from 68,000 all the way up to a new all-time high of $73.7 thousand. So this is a big moment. Again, the areas where the bears used to be the strongest are now where the bulls are the most comfortable buying. This is a great sign of like just the sides flipping and the bulls showing that they are remaining in control of this market. Now, a couple of other cool things that we actually saw over here is that if we go over to the RSI and the MACD, let's start with the MACD. The MACD is the highest that we have ever seen it, ever. We are at all-time highs if we're on the Coinbase exchange, 1-day time scale. This is the highest that we have ever seen the MACD. Now, the second highest that we've ever seen was in the previous bull run rally around March, February of 2021, right? We got pretty high up here. We got around 5,200. Right now, we're sitting at around 5,500. So this is the highest that the MACD has ever been. I mean, even things like the histogram is at near all-time highs when it correlates to the MACD. And this is just kind of show and testament that, man, we're sitting solid right now. We're sitting really high up. It's good to see these new highs break, because when we look at like the MACD, for example, on the 2020 or the 2017 timescale, as opposed to the 2021 bull run, well, the 2020 or the 2017 bull run for the MACD peaked out at around 2,600. You look at the 2021 bull run, which was the following cycle just a few years later, it went from a high of 2,600 all the way up to a high of nearly double that at 5,300. And now we're pushing even higher than that. So it kind of raises the question, are we going to double this again? Because a lot of people are still theorizing that we're not exactly near a long-term top. Like, a lot of people still think that this cycle has more gas in the tank. And I'm right there alongside them.
Now,
Now, another,
is the MACD something that can just exponentially go forever, whereas like the RSI taps out at 100?
it in theory, yes, right? But the more it gets to the upside, it can quote unquote be overextended. I hate using the word overextended because there's really no such thing. If demand keeps coming in and supply keeps being limited, that's like a big contributing factor to something like this. So long as demand keeps up, yes, it can keep going up. It's not like it caps out at like 10,000 or something like that. We can zoom out here and we can see that it just keeps going and going. However, it does slow down in a sense. But another cool thing here, TiVo, was the weekly chart. And if we go over to the weekly volume, this is actually something that I'm going to need to throw up here. But if we throw up the weekly volume, this was the highest that we have seen our weekly volume. And it's actually really kind of faint down here. But this is the highest level of weekly volume that we have seen since January of 2023, which is historic. This is the highest level of weekly volume that Bitcoin has seen on the Coinbase exchange since January 2023, about 14 months ago. So we are at new yearly highs in terms of volume. We're at new yearly highs in terms of prices. We're seeing records break, inflows skyrocket. Things like the MACD and other indicators look just as high as could be. And we're looking at this, and this is the kind of stuff that you want to see. Now, if we were breaking out to all-time highs like this with weak volume, low volatility, it just would not be convincing. But I always like to say that we need two things on a breakout. You need volume and you need volatility. If you don't have volume, it's not convincing. If you don't have volatility, then it's arguably not even a breakout, right? Because you want to see the buyers in this case breaking through resistance, shooting price upwards. You want it to be a convincing rally in terms of price, but you also want to make sure that there's a lot of people that are on board with this direction that the market has chosen. And right now, I'm seeing both. So I'm kind of sitting happy up here. Again, I'm not saying that we can just go up for forever and forever and forever without pulling back, but this is the kind of stuff that I like to see when we are breaking out to new all-time highs. So I know I gave us a mouthful there, Tiva. I'd love to kind of, tune you in, get your thoughts on this.
Yeah, I guess from a sentiment standpoint, like I agree with everything you're saying. It's hard to see this thing going down, which was kind of the opposite. I guess that's why it's such a psychological game sometimes of when, FTX was happening and everything was falling apart in the space and the bankruptcies. You're scared to buy it almost at, maybe 18, 20, 25. It starts creeping up, but you're kind of in the back of your mind. We're watching it creep up from the teens to the mid 20s, and you're like, well, yeah, but I mean, I could see it going down. Like, there's so much crazy stuff around the space right now. And then now the flip side to that, I mean, where are we a year and a half later? You're staring at it at all-time highs with all the demand and the Black Rocks and Fidelities, and you're looking at this thing and you're kind of like, how does it go down? How does it go down? And obviously that's, you can't think like that 100%, but I understand the sentiment. So it's a fascinating time just to be involved. And I don't want to segue us into the altcoin conversation, but that's kind of where we left this off when we were building the outline of what I wanted to ask you next. Was like, hey, here's my thought around Bitcoin. Now I have some questions about the altcoin market.
Yeah. And this is a big question. It's probably one of the most asked questions that we've been getting lately is like, when are altcoins going to move here? Is this normal? Because Bitcoin feels like it just keeps going up and up and up, and it's one of the top performers. And there are altcoins that are doing great, right? And this is a conversation that we had. It's like, don't get me wrong. There are some altcoins that are pulling 5, 10, 15, 100Xs out there. But when you look at all altcoins, it doesn't feel like we're in that typical euphoric phase of just altcoins. Everyone, you can kind of just shotgun approach it, and they're all just skyrocketing.
It's just a general blanket statement that I was like asking you and to
Yeah,
tee you up would be, all right, Bitcoin's at all-time highs, and then a lot of new altcoins are rocketing and maybe in some price discovery mode, no doubt. But our true blue chip, a lot of the top 20s that we know and love, there's still maybe even a double away from an all-time high. And so kind of
yeah.
like, does history show us something that we're on track to see that, or do we need to kind of look at this as maybe a Bitcoin dominant bull market? Is there something that we can look under the hood to compare from the past to see where we might be in the cycle?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. So the general consensus here, we're going to have the chart up in front of us, is that Bitcoin is typically the first mover. And so imagine things like a funnel. You have Bitcoin being the largest, so it's at the top of the funnel, and then everything kind of trickles down. All the money kind of trickles down that funnel from Bitcoin to Ethereum to large caps to mid caps to small caps. Meme coins are thrown in there. And there are exceptions, right? There are things that perform exceptionally well, and they don't have to follow the traditional method of money flowing. But Bitcoin is typically the first mover. It's the king of crypto. It leads the space, and that is where money typically starts off. So if we're looking at the start of the previous cycle over here, we can see that Bitcoin, really started to kind of go parabolic after the halving, which was and really around August, right? We can see this uptick right around here around August of 2020. And then prices really started skyrocketing going into September. Now, if we go and we look at something like the total two, for example, it's not quite the same. In fact, altcoins really didn't start kind of finding this bottom and stuff until later. You see, around like November, December, this is where altcoins started kind of taking off. I'm going to just circle this. This is where altcoins really started to take off around the November, December area. And by the time January and February was right around here, they were in their full fledged, like kind of euphoric start. Keyword there is start to the bull run. Whereas again, if we go back to something like Bitcoin, which we're going to do, then we can see that Bitcoin really started this around September, October. And then by the time December was around, it was like full fledged November, December. It was full fledged going parabolic over here. Whereas this was starting a few months later for altcoins. So we are seeing altcoins pick up. And a kind of a key thing that I want to highlight over here is that when Bitcoin passed its previous all time high, it was around the time of December, right? And then this is when things went crazy when it passed its previous all time high. Things kind of kicked off in December for Bitcoin. Going back to the total two, again, it lags behind. And so it didn't break its previous all time high, the altcoin market cap, which is the total two, until February, almost the end of February. So this is about like 3 months behind. Again, Bitcoin moves first, and then the altcoins kind of come in second. And so one of the biggest questions that we get asked is like, when are altcoins just going to go absolutely ballistic? And to that, I say, give it a little bit of time. Again, altcoins kind of move behind the cycle of Bitcoin. We're starting to see Bitcoin really take off. And I think a lot of altcoins are going to have their day in the spotlight. And so I think this is some valuable information to kind of share with the masses here and get everyone to understand, how we've typically worked in previous market cycles.
For sure. And then just a question that I've seen out there of people that might be pitching that it's a different type of cycle with Bitcoin, being that like a lot of the money um, coming from the institutions and living in the ETFs, does that change that it trickles down to the altcoin market? And I know we both really don't necessarily have the answer. It's an interesting thought, but I would maybe side on like all tides lift all boats, because then
Yeah.
the real OGs that have been Bitcoin holders forever, they have the extra funds and they're ready and excited to go play in the altcoin market like before. So I'm on the side that I think it'll come, but it is an interesting thought.
Yeah, no, it is. And it makes sense. I think that there are two sides to this, right? The first one is the one that you mentioned. By Bitcoin doing exceptionally well, it's not going to be a bad thing for altcoins, right? If we have Bitcoin getting mass adopted and everyone wants in on it and they're buying it and they're getting plugged into the space one way or another, whether that's through spot buying or ETFs or whatever it may be, altcoins aren't going to do bad. It's not like people are going to be like turned off of altcoins, right? If anything, that's a really positive thing. Now, the second side of this question is, since people are going to be doing so much buying through the ETFs, does that hurt the trickle down effect into altcoins? And I think a little bit, right? To a degree, yes, because it's going to be harder for them to cycle out of an ETF into a brokerage account into altcoins, whereas previously it would just be from their exchange, and then directly on that exchange they can sell into whatever altcoin they want because they already got the funds on the exchange. So does it a little limit it a little bit? Yes, but you have to understand also that the ETF buyers, the people who are involved with these ETFs, are also a different kind of customer. So, for the most part, these are people who probably wouldn't have done this in the first place. A lot of these people are newer to crypto. They are people that weren't around, or probably the people that wouldn't funnel into altcoins anyway. Hence, that's why they're in the ETFs. So, does it hurt the altcoin market and like how much would flood into it? I don't think it hurts it. I think you might have a little bit of people that moved from their spot accounts to these ETF accounts, but I think the bulk of people who like to trade spot and like to be in possession of their crypto and own it, those people are still very much here. So you have two different demographics, right? The ETF caters to one demographic who probably wouldn't touch altcoins anyway. And then you have the spot people, which are still very much there. And we've seen this by um, looking at the spot volumes just disappearing, and as well as the OTC volumes disappearing as well.
No, all good points. And then even to build on the altcoin point as well, like I'm starting to see on these shows, the talking heads. There's a lot of money managers that are even bragging about owning Ethereum, being like, I like Bitcoin, but I love Ethereum. And so I even remember back during the last frenzy, like Kramer owned Ethereum and he sold his
Yeah.
Bitcoin and sold his Ethereum. And he was like, he's like, oh, I love these projects, blah, blah, blah. And he sold it. And then he was bragging about like paying off his farm or paying off one of his mortgages on his beach house or something. So it's like these, on the ticker symbols on CNBC all day, it's Bitcoin, it's Ethereum, and even Solana's up there now. So,
Yeah.
to think that, there's not some big dogs from the TradFi markets that are jumping into DeFi, don't be remiss. Obviously, the ETF gives it a lot more ability to jump in, but they're there now. And if things start getting a little crazy, everybody's going to pile right back in.
Agreed, man. Did you see that BlackRock now owns more Bitcoin than MicroStrategy?
I did, and then Microstrategy immediately started announcing their loan to go buy more Bitcoin. It's fascinating race. I mean, I think BlackRock obviously has more ability probably to take the lead
Yep.
sooner rather than later and keep it, but Saylor's not going down without a fight.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. You talk about BlackRock, they are the largest asset manager in the world, roughly $10 trillion in assets under management. We have MicroStrategy and Michael Saylor at the helm of MicroStrategy. And he's been buying Bitcoin for years. He's just under 200,000 Bitcoin. The last time I checked, he was around 193,000 Bitcoin in MicroStrategy. And within 2 months of the Bitcoin ETFs being out, BlackRock has accumulated 195,000 plus Bitcoin, which means that BlackRock in 2 months has bought more Bitcoin than MicroStrategy and Michael Saylor since their inception. It is wild. BlackRock now holds more Bitcoin than MicroStrategy within 2 months of the ETFs coming out. And everyone always looks at MicroStrategy as this behemoth who holds so much of Bitcoin. Well, now we got to look at BlackRock in kind of the same light. And man, that is wild. I don't think anyone expected these kind of numbers so fast. It's wild. You have Bitcoin critics now that are coming into the spotlight and defending Bitcoin. I know that we saw Jamie Dimon actually, I think he was in the news or on Twitter or something, but he's basically said that he is defending people's right to buy Bitcoin, even though it's something that he's never going to touch. which is a wild statement. Again, this is a guy whose organization is very optimistic of the crypto markets. And yeah, Tiva's got it on the screen here. And I quote, he is defending people's right to buy Bitcoin, even though he is not someone that would buy it. So what a statement.
I mean, like
What a
he
statement.
compared buying Jamie Dimon compares buying Bitcoin to smoking a cigarette.
He wouldn't smoke, but he lets people smoke.
I guess. I mean, who doesn't love a drunk cig?
Yeah. I think that this is him. I don't even know what to think about this. I think he knows that it would be in his best interest to not fade Bitcoin anymore. I think a lot of those like mega Bitcoin bears are like, maybe I was wrong. Maybe I shouldn't trash on it too much because it hurts my reputation the further that this thing goes up. So now we're slowly starting to see these people pivot. And we have another one that we're going to talk about. Say, hey, it's not for me. It's okay if you do it, but it's not for me. And it used to be this thing's rat poison. You should never buy it. It's a scam. It is, etc. Well, those people's attitudes are shifting quick. And another one was Peter Schiff. We have a tweet from him, basically kind of just being less pessimistic about the crypto markets. And Tivo's going to flash it up on the screen over here, basically saying, hey, the supply of Bitcoin will not be cut in half by the halving. And he's right by that. The supply, the total circulating supply of Bitcoin in existence, will not be cut in half by the halving, but over 90% of Bitcoin, but the thing that will get cut in half here is the growth rate of Bitcoin. And Peter, I could not agree more with you. He says what matters the most is how much Bitcoin is in the current supply that holders are wanting to sell. And man, Peter's spot on. In fact, this is something that we talked about previously. When you look at Bitcoin, Bitcoin is starting to like reach a crisis point right now. And this is something that we talked about a few weeks ago. We can roll the clip right here. And we spent a lot of time in last week's market update talking about just how rare Bitcoin had become due to like over the desk trading and over the desk counters being really low in supply. Same thing with exchanges. We also had the halving factoring into all of this. And so on all these different fronts, the supply of Bitcoin is really dwindling while the demand for it is exponentially increasing, which is just something really cool. So yeah, I mean, Tiva, I don't know if you had any thoughts on this, but it just backs the idea of this is an awesome spot to be for just about every crypto investor. And so in those clips, we talked about Bitcoin seeing really low supply on OTC desks. We saw Bitcoin seeing really low supply on exchanges. And even Peter, I think this was an indirect compliment. I don't think he was actually trying to give Bitcoin some props here. But we are actually at the risk of a liquidity crisis. And I think we can flash up this article because there was another analyst kind of talking about this, saying that, man, Bitcoin only has 6 more months of continuing on the path that it's on before it reaches a true liquidity crisis. And yeah, we got it on the screen here. And man, they are right. And this is something that, again, we talked about weeks ago. And so if you are one of the listeners and you were able to kind of catch on this, we try to bring all the information to you as early as possible before there's articles like this getting covered. So we're looking at the metrics behind the scenes for you. We're breaking it down before it's mainstream. And hopefully some people were able to kind of benefit from this. Again, not giving you legal, financial, or tax advice in any way. But, patting ourselves on the back a little bit here because we called this weeks ago. And now there's like mainstream analysts saying, hey, there's only 6 more months of this thing continuing before there is a true liquidity crisis. And Peter Schiff is, I think, indirectly kind of alluding to that same topic of like, man, supply and demand is important here. And we are just seeing the supply dwindle and dwindle and dwindle as demand continues to skyrocket. So what a great time to be in the crypto markets. Or should I clarify here? What a great time to be an existing holder of crypto. If you're entering in for the first time, you're probably going, do I really want to enter in now? Is it too late? And to that, I would say, I don't think so. I think that crypto has a very bright future. Obviously, there's going to be its ups and downs, but man, I think the future is looking so bright. And all the existing holders here are sitting very happy. I think they're in a great spot.
Yeah, man. again, it's the cycles and how you think about where you were not that long ago, and again, to see how the mindsets are now around the space, and to have all these newcomers with the ETF and institutions, and just our morale around around the office here has been just astronomically more fun. Like, remember, we're really remote basically, but we'll do like the virtual happy hour on every other Friday just to hang out with the team. And it turned into like a legit coaching call. Like, normally we talk, hey, what's everybody doing this weekend? What do you got plans? And then for an hour straight, everybody just talked about their crypto bags and big wins. And the NFT boys over at Real Talk NFT had some amazing wins. You've had some coin of the week calls that just have rocketed. Even I'm jumping in with Robinhood, like everybody from our analysts down to the producers. And then Kevin goes, everybody's a genius in a bull market. So we're bull
Uh,
market confirmed.
yeah, it is, man. I mean, it's just a great time to be in this in its entirety. And the one thing that I feel like is really holding us back is Grayscale. And it's just a matter and like people are always going to take profits, right? But one of the solutions that Grayscale is kind of offering here is I think they are looking at the market and saying, we've got to stop this from a business perspective. If this keeps up, like we can go out of business from everyone just going to our competitors. And so a cool little kind of data piece over here is that even with the price appreciation of Bitcoin, Grayscale has still lost 36% of their assets under management. So Grayscale's Bitcoin holdings have plummeted by 36% in terms of their Bitcoin holdings under management, which is a wild number for a company. If you're talking about a company losing 30s, I mean, you don't see that anywhere. That is like financial crisis levels of a crash. And everyone's just going to their competitors, and that's with the asset that they're holding rapidly appreciating in value. So when we're looking at this, man, Grayscale is losing a lot of business. For the people who don't know, essentially Grayscale has their ETF out. The deal here is that, as we mentioned earlier, they charge a 1.5% fee, which is roughly like 6 to 10 times higher depending on their competitors. You look at BlackRock, which charges a 0.25% fee. You have Fidelity, which offers, I think, a 0.39% fee. And those are the two biggest competitors, and they're a fraction of the cost. So people are saying, okay, well, I'm up on this Bitcoin. Why would I continue to hold it for this insane fee when they can just go to a mainstream name like one of these competitors? And so I think Grayscale is realizing this now. And so rumor has it that they are going to be offering some sort of new, and I quote, Bitcoin mini trust in an attempt to stop the massive exodus that they've seen. And so Grayscale has already seen, I believe it's like 11 billion with a B, like Bitcoin leave. So they've seen around $11 billion of Bitcoin leave their ETF and their assets under management here. And they're looking at this saying, how can I get this to stop? Because they have to, right? If they continue to see that 2 months from now, another $11 billion leave, and then after that, another $11 billion leave, I don't even think that they had that much in assets under management. I think the last time I checked, it was around, and I'm trying to find it. Yeah, they're around 28 billion. So they can only afford to do that like 2, 3 more times, and then all the funds are gone. So if that pattern continues in Grayscale, which it's odd that it would, right? I don't expect that it will continue at that rate. But if we do see the same continued like outflow rate from Grayscale, then they can only keep this up for around 4 to 5 more months before everything's out of Grayscale. And so I do expect it to slow. And I do kind of trust that they will probably try to find a way to create some sort of solution to this. And apparently, this new mini trust is going to be a way to do that and offer Bitcoin fees at a significantly lower rate. So, from a business perspective, it makes sense, right, TiVo?
Yeah. It definitely feels like they're in a tough spot. I mean, I know that they've made a lot of money over the years, but yeah, it does. It doesn't seem like an easy fix unless you change the pricing, which they're trying to do with the new offering. But here's a thought, and I know we've
Yeah.
seen this online. This isn't in our notes, but we've seen that the Ethereum ETF has the odds have gone down from our analysts. Maybe it went from 60% to 30%. for the May approval date. And so I wonder, and maybe correct me if I'm wrong, this is just a thought, but I wonder, has this maybe affected the war chest that GBTC Grayscale has as a business for deploying lawyers to go fight for the Ethereum ETF? Because if you look back on the Bitcoin ETF, they were the leading charge. It was their lawyers versus the
Yeah.
SEC that won the decisions, that gave them the ability to go forward and keep going and eventually basically get this thing approved through the courts. And we all know how much lawyers cost, so that,
Mhm.
that was a huge investment from them to just to get it approved to an ETF. Then everybody piles on and gets approved. So BlackRock rides the wave, Bitwise rides the wave, Fidelity, etc., Arc, etc. And then so now is Grayscale kind of looking at the Ethereum thing, being like, well, we have the futures, so then what? Maybe we don't want an Ethereum ETF right away, because then it's going to give the ability for everybody else to pile on.
Yeah. I mean, I think you're right there. You know, part of the problem is that they were sitting happy for so long, right? They were the only person that was offering this kind of thing for years. And so I think they got a little bit complacent.
They
But yeah, I
thought they
mean,
thought that they thought like, well, we're the trusted way to do
yeah.
Bitcoin, and then maybe we don't know what their
Right.
estimations were in their own meetings, but yeah, I think we can agree, offering this new thing, they're saying, oh shit, we've lost a couple more billion than we thought.
Yeah. And you're right about the Ethereum thing too. That seems to have a lower likelihood of happening by the dates that we thought now. So it was looking like it was around a 60% likelihood of getting approved by May. And now that's down to about a 30%. So on that subject, this is something that I think is going to happen. Now, when it happens, that seems to be the big thing up for debate. I still think we have an extremely high likelihood of getting an ETF passed. It just might be a little bit later than we were anticipating. From my understanding of the situation, talking and reading after James's stuff, who we had on the podcast not too long ago. He's a Bloomberg intelligence analyst who specializes in ETFs of all kinds. But basically, it seems like people are dragging their feet when it comes to this, and that there isn't a giant sense of urgency, and that there's maybe some more complications, which is to be expected because Ethereum by nature is a little bit more complex than something like Bitcoin. There's a lot of moving parts. It's proof of stake as opposed to proof of work. It has all these developers and applications and DeFi's and, passive income through the staking programs. There's a lot of complexities when it comes to it and the smart contracts and just everything else. So it makes sense. But I want to clarify, I think that we're going to see Ethereum ETFs. It might be a little bit later than we anticipated. Maybe we don't get it by May. But I think that we're going to get one eventually. To be frank, I think we're going to get one in the next year or two. I think it'd be crazy if we don't get an Ethereum ETF in the next year. But that's still what I'm looking at. I think, worst case scenario, we get delayed a little bit after May, but overall, I'm still really optimistic on us getting an Ethereum ETF. I think that the Bitcoin ETF was such a smashing success that all the asset managers are going to want it,
And that
right?
and that and I
They're,
agree with you, but maybe Grayscale's like, hey, BlackRock, why don't you throw some lawyers at it? Like maybe
yeah,
that might slow it down a little bit, as Grayscale's looking at the situation they're in currently and being
yeah.
like, we can't dedicate 300 million to lawyer fees to get this thing approved just for everybody to run out of the Ethereum trust.
No, it's a solid point. I mean, they could be saying, hey, let's sit back for a little bit. Let's accumulate a little bit of the money that we spent on all this stuff. And I think that that's like a real thing that could be happening here, is that maybe even BlackRock too, not just Grayscale. I think a lot of these people who fought the SEC and trying to get this stuff approved, they could be saying, hey, let's recoup a little bit of our money, which they are definitely doing from these inflows. Um, but let's recoup a little bit of money, give this a little bit of time, and then we'll go back and kind of attack these things a little bit later on. So I think it's a real scenario. And the more revenue that these generate for these businesses, I think the faster that we will see, right? Because if they're, all of a sudden, if they're making 10 times what they expected, then that is going to incentivize them to say, well, let's go get another one created and let's like rinse and repeat the whole cycle. And we thought that we were gonna, let's just make up a number. We thought we were gonna do $10 billion from this thing, and we generated 100 billion. Well, let's go do the same thing with Ethereum. And if we thought Ethereum was going to get us 100 million and it does 10 billion, great. Like the margins are a lot better than we expected. So I think the more money that these make, these TradFi companies, the more likely it is for them to directly seek out these Ethereum ETF approvals.
Well, I couldn't agree with you more, and I hope it comes sooner rather than later. But it doesn't hurt at all the sentiment of the space right now. The sentiment is sky high. Because did you see that? Well, there's two things. Shout out to our boy Little Bubble. Did you see the Michael Saylor had an interview? I don't know if it was live yesterday or maybe the
I
day
saw
before, but the
this.
clips were going crazy yesterday, and he had one of the best lines. He's like, the quote was, "People who use fiat, we have a word for them. We call them poor." And it was
Yeah.
such an electric line. It starts flying around the Twitter timeline. And of course, Little Bubble gets in there and whips up some awesome mix. If you don't know Little Bubbles, you got to check him out. But that mix was amazing with the all the sounds and the video clips. And on top of that, even Drake. So even Drake shared a Michael Saylor clip on his Instagram, which, in my opinion, being in the social media space, I mean, you have a top 10 list of who's the most influential people right now on social media. And Kim K and her clan would definitely be up there in the top. But I'm in my opinion, Drake is a top 10. Obviously an artist, you could debate his whether you like his music or not, but as an influencer, as people who are tuned into what he's posting and what he's doing every single day, like he's up there in my book. And so I thought that was fascinating.
Yeah, man. The most influential people want into crypto. And like I feel like I keep saying this, but it's so true. Like this is just another example of this. It doesn't have to be BlackRock. It doesn't have to be Fidelity. It doesn't have to be like these really famous TradFi people. It's just anyone of significance is looking at the crypto markets and they are recognizing its greatness, right? Greatness recognizes greatness. And this is just man, another example of that, you have these people who are at the absolute peak of social media and entertainment and all this stuff, and they're saying, we like Bitcoin.
100%.
So,
Even my old boss, Dave Portnoy, El Stool Presidente, is doing his Davy Day Trader stuff. I know he's locked into some airlines trades and whatnot, but even he's been hitting the crypto Twitter virality with his take on how he sold his Bitcoin, or I think he got screwed by FTX as well, and even his stream is sponsored by Kraken, I believe. And
yeah.
so it's the influence are coming back, and I think we're seeing the tip of that iceberg. And when things take off, everybody starts coming out of the woodwork. There were a couple people that I'm friends with, and then we were discussing it last week, and I started hearing people be like, "Well, yeah, I bought at 40. Like, I'm excited about it." Blah blah blah. I'm like, "You didn't say that. You didn't say that
Yeah.
3-4 months ago. I didn't.
Yep.
We talk about it. I bring it up, every once in a while. You never told me you were buying back then. Now everybody's a genius." So I feel the
You're going
sentiment
to,
shifting. What about yourself?
yeah, man, you're going to see these people come out of the woodworks again. I'm already seeing it on like TikTok and Instagram and YouTube's and the ads that are just getting shoved into my face of the spontaneous crypto gurus just out of nowhere, just in your face again. And you go back and you look at their history and it's like, oh, like they created an account like 3 weeks ago. They have no history. And it's like, yeah, I bought Bitcoin when it was at $15,000. I got in at a 50x leverage. I've been riding it the whole way. And it's like, all right, well, where were you when that was happening? Like, why didn't we have content from you when it was happening? And there's a lot of people out there that are kind of like in that boat now. So to everyone who's been in the space and lived through the bear market and made content and all that, shout out to all of you.
And I'll say
But
this before we wrap up. As a content person that came from Barstool and now works here, there to be in the content game, you have to constantly put out stuff every day,
oh
three,
yeah,
4 times a day. And I know, I try my best to keep our socials active.
yeah,
But that's why I think that we're unique and we're different and we're focused on the true behind the scenes research of what's going on. We're not worried about putting out 4 TikToks a day. We're worried about gathering the information, talking to the right people to really deep dive down in the space of what's really going on. So I think that's what separates us. Yes, we're content creators. We have our shows. I try to keep the social medias active, definitely killing the meme game on Twitter, but we're not out there, trying to get 100, K views on TikToks telling you that we bought this coin, sold that coin, made this, buying a Lambo, XYZ. And so, I hope that that's why you enjoy this program and feel like, maybe you
yeah.
might listen to us more deeply when we put out less content instead of, oversaturating you and feeling like we need to come up with a new pitch of the next 10x that we just grabbed and when we bought Bitcoin, etc.
Absolutely, man. Well, I think that's a great place to kind of round us out here. As the crypto markets are continuing, have a sense of just like being patient here, right? We don't want to FOMO into things. Again, I think that there is a lot of greatness to go on here, but I don't know if we're at the stage where you can just blindly throw darts at the board and just pray for stuff to happen. This is one of those areas. Like, again, we're breaking out the all-time highs. I think there's a lot of great stuff to come. But this is one of those areas where I am being just a little bit patient. I'm kind of waiting for Bitcoin to figure itself out. We're continuing to hit new all-time highs. But man, it's an area that I'm excited for. And again, I've said this before, but you can bet that if there are dips coming, I will be the one buying them. So we hope all of you did enjoy. Again, if you like the content that we have over here, make sure you just hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and drop us a review. We love to hear from all of you and get a solid review. And for all you Spotify and Apple Music listeners. So that's going to wrap us up for today's episode. We hope that all of you enjoyed, and we'll see all of you at the same time, same place next week.